Innovative.
Dynamic.
Gritty.
Determined.
Warrior.
This podcast is about the innovators,
the leaders on the front lines of adversity,
the all-around good people doing good deeds.
They are the civic warriors of the world.
Witham's guests are the leaders in the nonprofit industry affecting change.
They try, they fail, they overcome.
Through their stories, we can join forces to become civic warriors.
The following interview took place prior to the COVID-19 restrictions. With that said, we are eager to share what we've learned from Nature Sacred, an organization whose work is arguably even more important today than it was a month ago, as we need nearby nature now more than ever before.
Hey Warriors, welcome to the show. Today we are talking with Alden Stoner, the CEO of Nature Sacred. This is Brad Caruso and Matt Mojica here with me.
Hi guys.
And we're going to talk about Nature Sacred, which is a super cool not-for-profit down here in Annapolis, Maryland. Nature Sacred exists to inspire, inform, and guide communities in the creation of public green spaces, as they call them sacred places, designed to improve mental health, unify communities, and engender peace. For over 25 years, Nature Sacred has partnered with over 130 communities across the country to infuse nearby nature into places where healing is often needed most. Distressed urban neighborhoods, schools, hospitals, prisons, and more. So welcome to the show, Alden.
Thanks. I'm delighted to be here.
I could tell, Yeah. Alden's packed with a room full of auditors and accountants. We got the tax guy, we got the audit guys, we have a
the whole crew. Yeah. The crew's all here.
The crew's all here.
That's awesome.
No, it is. We're excited. So thanks for being here. We appreciate being a part of your organization and coming to your cool office with your cool wall behind us with a lot of stuff written on it.
It's been a fun day.
It's been a fun day.
Yeah, we like to sort of have the brand surround us and surround everything we do. So here in our offices, we have these journal entries that are recreated from actual journals, entries from across our spaces across the country. So it's pretty exciting.
Cool. And those journals, and we'll get into this, I think, a little bit more, but for each of your sacred places, there's a bench, and at the bench, there's also a journal.
Yeah, there are a couple of hallmarks of our sacred places. There is a portal, so that you always know that you're entering into a new space, a path that you can follow along and know that it sort of guides your thinking along with everything else. A destination, so a place to reflect, sit, meditate, be quiet in nature, and a sense of surround to give you that sense of surround and safety. And we as humans, there are biological triggers in our brain that want that sense of safety, and that's when our cortisol levels drop and all that. There's evidence to produce that. And at each one of our spaces, there is our signature bench that used to be made from pickle barrel wood, but actually it today is now made from refurbished wood from the joists of old houses, deconstructed houses in Baltimore.
Where did you get the idea for the benches originally? One of the coolest parts of everything, how they had that hallmark bench in the middle, and that's kind of the hallmark, as you said, of the entire place.
Yeah, I mean, the benches, I think, evolved. So in our very first space, we knew we wanted something, but we weren't totally sure. And we worked with a couple of folks from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So we're here in Annapolis, and my father, Tom Stoner, has been involved with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation for a number of years. And a couple of people there helped create both design and then actually produce and create the first benches. And that they are an extraordinary design, and people have asked us many, many, many times over the years if they could have a bench, if they could buy a bench anywhere. And the only way you can get a bench today is if you have a sacred place. Yeah, and the bench story is really incredible. It's really a supply chain for social good, because we get the wood from the joists of the deconstructed houses in Baltimore. That wood then gets sent to Western Correctional Institute, where we actually have a sacred place and a workforce development program, and it gets constructed by inmates, and then it goes to the League for People with Disabilities in Baltimore, and they either install them if they're local to the space, or they help manage and advise the rest of the Nature Sacred network on how to maintain their benches. So it's got a pretty powerful story, and yeah, I can tell you a story about a particular gentleman who's of interest. If you want me to.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%.
Just keep rapping.
Just keep
100%.
rapping.
Just keep
That's what
rapping.
makes it
Okay.
fun. Yeah.
Okay. One of our most ardent fire souls, and fire soul is the word that we use for the community leaders, the spark in the community who helps bring these spaces to reality, and that means both from the construction perspective and the ideation perspective, but also from the maintenance and the programmatic work and just bringing the community in. So one of our most ardent fire souls, Todd Marcus, at Intersection of Change in Baltimore, he was in need of some landscaping help and heard about a new firm called Division Street Landscaping. And so he had him come over, this gentleman come over and look at the property to see if he could, help with the landscaping. And he immediately looked at the bench and said, "Oh my gosh, I know that bench. I built that bench." Wow. And Todd Marcus is, such a long-standing fire soul that he knew that the only way that was possible is if this gentleman was formerly an inmate of Western Correctional. And his name is Alex Smith. And so he immediately called us up and said, "You're not going to believe this story." And so we went up and met with Alex, and he didn't know anything about landscaping before going into Western Correctional. Heard about this program that we were going to create a sacred place inside the prison, raised his hand to be a part of that, and was invited to do so. And it turns out, as we were unpacking the story with Alex, that he was one of just a few inmates who was in an original visioning session with my father, Tom Stoner, the warden at the time, the landscape architect, and I believe one or two other prison administrators. And he helped craft and vision what this place was going to be. And so he got really into landscaping, started reading up on it, was a part of that program, helped build those benches, got out of prison in, I believe it was 2012, and started Division Street Landscaping. And they primarily work in Baltimore, and they also primarily hire people with barriers to entry for work. And he's just, that's the full circle.
That's
full
incredible.
cycle.
Yeah, how that occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Impact at its core, right?
That's impact at its core.
Yeah. So, and he's just an incredible human.
It's exciting to hear. I always love hearing those real compassionate stories and real life stories about how, something that you've done has created such an impact for another, and then it's the gift that keeps on giving, because now that person is then giving back to more and to creating more opportunity for others, that if you didn't do what you did, that person wouldn't have done what they did. And it's this exponential effect that can never be measured, but you know about it,
Right.
You feel it and experience that.
I've spent much of my career in the area of impact and you want to count things, and it's important to quantify impact, but not everything that counts can be counted. And
right.
so
I like that.
Yeah, Einstein said it. I wish I could take credit for it.
No,
but why not quote the best?
None of us
I would have
known
believed.
that.
I would have believed that. I would have believed that.
Yeah.
I'm sure Google couldn't tell you that, so no one would know.
But it's true, and there's just the ripple effects are many, and especially with our spaces, we have had the benefit of helping communities create these spaces, and it's all community-led design, community-led desire. It is not a top-down, it is a bottom-up, but with each one of these, they create a different sense. And the only way we really knew that things were working was because of the journal entries. So we could put these journals in, and that was that came in our first or second space, and it was an idea from, I believe it was Chuck Foster's mother. I don't want to misquote, but I believe it was Chuck Foster's mother. And Chuck Foster is one of our board members.
Okay.
And was the gentleman who helped build our first benches before he went in to help train the inmates at Western Correctional. And she had the idea of, why not put a journal in this bench, and we today, almost 25 years later, have thousands of journal entries, and people say the most extraordinary things. They share their loves and proposals. I
was just going to ask you, are there any proposals that go into there? Because that's a cool
and
thing.
Weddings take place in our spaces too.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
weddings.
In fact, up in Baltimore, there was a political confirmation or something that happened in one of our spaces.
Oh, wow.
So Lots of great activity on that. But, also there are people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. At University of Maryland, they will put in, I'm thinking about killing myself. And it becomes sort of an analog Twitter. People will respond to that and say, you matter, this matters, like, keep with it. And the person will go back and say, thank you for saying that. And so there is a definite dialogue that happens, and you can't quantify, back to the quantification, you can't quantify the value of that impact. But we know that people are using these spaces in extraordinary ways, and it feeds their souls. And, soul work is so important. And as we struggle with really being connected with ourselves, as, the city and as technology sort of becomes so pervasive, taking those moments to yourself, those reflective moments, especially in nature, it's so much easier to do that when you're in nature, because nature reflects that, because it takes its time, and we all need to take our time. And it's hard to do that when you're jam-packed with a crazy schedule.
Yeah, we always forget that. We were talking about today, and Alden said a good phrase to us that you should spend 20 minutes a day in green.
Yes.
And, as us as auditors in the month that we're in, crazy time of year, we don't always take heed of that, but we should, because start losing reality a little bit. Ingrained in the computer, your brain starts going a little off tangent, and you lose track of the important things in life, and the feeling that we're all kind of part of this earth to some degree.
Absolutely.
Very connected to the earth. We just don't realize it always.
Yeah, there is this sacred, and why it's called nature sacred is there is a sacred connection between the human and nature. And we are nature, and nature is us. And 20 minutes a day in nature can reduce cortisol levels. It can increase all kinds of mental, physical, and community well-being. And it's 20 minutes a day isn't that much, It's walk around the block.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, but that's it. So, and that's sort of the optimal dose that evidence-based research is showing.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And one of the things I found in poking around Nature Sacred's website is they have a published paper called "The Healing Power of Nature," which is just very cool. That drawn the connection through research.
Yeah, we had in 2012 by then we had established a number of sites, so we knew there was something here. We knew that communities cared, that they were impacted positively. More and more communities were asking. I mean, we had over 1,000 grant requests at the time, and we were at that time a grant giving organization, and only gave about 130 grants. So it's somewhere around, I don't know, Harvard's acceptance rate or something. Point is that there's a lot of need, and there's a lot of desire for these types of spaces. So we knew we were onto something, but how do you scale? How do you start to scale? Well, we realized that in order to make the case, we had to prove the numbers. And if you want to get policymakers' attention, if you want to get corporate attention, you've got to prove it by the numbers. These are truths that we all know somewhere deep in our blueprint, but we are living in a time of data, and so we kicked off a national program called the Nature Sacred Awards program that coupled research, scientific, evidence-based research plus design. So we funded the creation of 5 spaces nationally that all had major research projects affiliated with them. And the outpouring of that is the healing power of nature, which is a part of that, but it also has a lot of additional research that's happened in the field that's sort of, snowballed since then. Not that we were the spark necessarily, but we definitely fanned the fire.
Definitely is an understatement. So, we kind of jumped into it a little bit, but, I guess bring us up to speed a little bit. So I think one of the cool parts and kind of how we at Witham got involved with Nature Sacred is, they're kind of going through the process, as some organizations do, of, to a degree redefining yourself, but to a degree, kind of re-looking at how you go about your programs, as well as how you raise funds to fund those programs, as well as, what you're ultimately trying to accomplish and achieve. And so we originally got involved because the organization is moving from more of a grant-making, non-operating foundation to an operating foundation, which is a very substantial switch in the terms of the IRS and the paperwork and everything you have to do to make that happen. But also just in the mindset of, we're no longer a checkbook. We're the ones actually physically doing the work, physically getting more involved, and we're embarking on the journey of self-sustainability. We're no longer going to be relying upon a contribution from one individual or from few individuals. There's a lot that goes into that, which is, it's an exciting time because, and you're seeing it more and more nowadays, organizations becoming operating foundations, because you're starting to see, especially with our, we were talking about, joking about millennials, but one big part about millennials is we want to be actively involved in it. My parents, my grandparents' generation wanted to write a check. My grandma Mimi, if you call her up, she'll probably write you a check if you give her a compelling story. I'm probably not that way. But if you say, hey, we want to get you involved, and if I was passionate about the cause, I would get involved. And so I think that's a big shift in kind of the world, and my prediction is we're going to see a lot more scenarios like yours, which is a lot more operating foundations, because just in general our type of philanthropy is actively get involved in the work and make it happen. So you kind of see that shift. So I guess Alden, why don't you bring us up to speed, kind of, how did the foundation even start, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so the foundation started in 1996. My parents, Tom and Kitty Stoner, were on a trip to London, and they arrived early, and so weren't able to check in. And it's after a long flight in a airplane where you're confined. They went out for a walk and came upon a park, and there was a portal into this park. They walked in and were really just transported, and all of a sudden we're able to breathe after being
the stuffy
air and the sort of jostling around that happens with travel, and just
especially with a screaming baby next to you. So you need to clear your head after that.
Yeah, and so they noticed that there were a number of benches, and that many of them had plaques on them about World War II, and some had little things sort of inscribed on the bench in the back. And despite the fact that World War II was at that point a memory, a distant
50 years past,
it was memory. These were still spaces that were being utilized, that were gifts to the city, that made London a particularly livable city. And they were all open to anyone, and open is a huge value of ours. It has to be not just open, but welcoming. And so anyway, that was sort of the beginning of inflection. The other thing is that my mom had always been involved in the wellness initiative. She created one of the first wellness programs for a company, for my father's company, Stoner Broadcasting System, in the 1980s. And so this idea of open community and well-being started to sort of percolate. So it just started out small ideas.
She was well above her time too. I mean, wellness programs now are common, but then, I mean, there's a different corporate culture back in the 80s. Not that I was there to remember it, but I heard about it. I read about it in a book. I read it about it in a leather-bound book on my shelf.
It's
made of mahogany.
Perhaps.
Right.
She was prescient in that way, for sure. And so they saw the unmet need, and particularly they came from Iowa out to the DC area, and Baltimore and Washington are incredibly different cities.
I can imagine.
Than the plains of Iowa, where there's space and green and nature all around you. And so it started small, and the initiative, it was called the TKF Foundation at the time, but the name of their program was Open Spaces, Sacred Places, which is a mouthful, but really we were enumerating exactly what we were after. It needed to be an open space, and it needed to be a sacred place. So these were not rec parks. These were not, other types of parks. These were meant to be reflective, contemplative, quiet spaces in the city. But that word sacred, early days, was a challenge for some people. I will say nearly 25 years later, there are a lot fewer questions about that word, because we have shifted as a society. And, as people, I think, have gone to belong to fewer and fewer religious institutions, that doesn't mean that there's any less spirituality or spiritual capital. Search for that spiritual capital. And so,
if anything, it's only expanded just in a different way,
right?
So I think
as we move towards mindfulness and some of these other things.
And I learned something very interesting. I met a gentleman who's heavily, he was kind of like a psychologist, but wasn't a psychologist. He was pitching like emotional intelligence and learning, the connection between like the soul and the mind. And it was like, I went through a program with him. It was like an education class, and it was absolutely wild when you really like figure out how to connect your emotions to your mind, it's wild what you like unlock, and it's a spiritual journey to a degree. But I think nowadays, a lot of people are kind of shying away from institutions, call them institutions, whether it be religious, government, whatever it might be, and are moving more towards individuality because we're so connected with technology and everything else going on. It's wild, yeah.
We're in that
such a shift.
Form of the iPhone, the
everything, yeah.
And so it's, the I meditation or the I well-being, whatever that is. And it's interesting because each one of our spaces is custom because it's created by the community, and I think that's part of what also attracts this idea to people because it's really owned by the place and the people of that place.
Yeah, and just in general, not a little bit of a tangent, but anybody that is kind of going through any troubles or issues, they always say if you journalize it or you write it down or you put yourself in a place of like serenity, and nature spaces definitely, I would consider that. I consider that and the ocean are the two places of like real serenity is writing it down. And I've had emotional, mental problems in my life, and you write it down and you read it, you're like, oh, it's not so bad. Or you read it, you're like, what the heck am I thinking? And it changes. It really, it really has an exponential impact on your well-being, more than you'd imagine. And all it is but you have to write it. Doing that in your iPhone is not the same thing as you physically writing something with a pen. Yeah. Completely different scenario.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Different neural pathways.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah, I wasn't even talking about science. I was.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's just clicking
I'm just thinking
buttons
in
versus
practicality.
actually write it.
100%.
It's a different neural pathway.
So I should say it differently. That's what explains it. That's what explains my reaction to the scenario. Yeah.
And I think what's great is everyone is completely different because of the journal. Like it's building vastly different communities, and you kind of learn about the victories and the struggles of each people through those journals. Like just reading some of the quotes throughout the wall, it's eye-opening. It's not like scrolling through Twitter or anything. It's building a community, and it kind of shows that we're all in this together in such an individualized world, which I liked.
Yeah, it's a stitching of the fabric of the community, for sure. And I'll just give you a couple of examples on that. There's a space here in Annapolis that's just down the street from a couple of restaurants, and often the restaurants are very busy, and so they send people with their beepers down to our sacred places. And so we have just a plethora of writings in those journals always, because there's a lot of international visitors, and this is where you have people who are on dates and talking about their meet cutes and all kinds of different things. So there's that juxtaposed with our space in Legacy Hospital in Portland, Oregon. So that's right off of two units. One is the cardiac unit and the other is the maternity ward. And so in those journals you have beautiful entries about children coming into this world, and fathers are expecting the mom to actually go into labor and what those sort of emotions are like, and you have families who are waiting for their parents to get out of cardiac surgery and what that's like, and sometimes they don't come out of cardiac surgery, and then people sort of process their emotions in those gardens because those are big life moments. Yeah. And
hospitals contain a lot of big life moments, whether beginning or end.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And the other one I'll just share with you is actually the space at Western Correctional. So one of the things that came out of that visioning is that the inmates felt like they couldn't really be authentic in prison, because if they showed vulnerability, then that would be a problem within the system with other inmates. And so, and yet people get married, people are born, people die. Like they have these big things that are happening, but can't really communicate it in a
healthy,
outward way.
Right. Yeah. So the landscape architect there came up with this idea of the well of unspoken truths. And they drilled down 20 feet into the ground, a small hole. And so the inmates there could write a journal entry, tear it and throw it down the well of unspoken truths, and no one can access it.
That's why it's the well of unspoken truths.
Right, but it got written, it was expressed, it was out of their being, and then stayed safe. So each community,
idea.
each community does have a different vibe and a different culture around it, but all beautiful in different ways.
How often do you change out the journals? Because I can imagine they probably fill up fairly quickly.
Yeah, each space is different. So there's some that fill up quite quickly, and for each space we have a fire soul, and that's that community leader. And so they're actually in charge of monitoring the journals, and if they're getting full, they give us a call, say send us more journals, and we do. And so and other spaces have less traffic, and yet other spaces are in particularly tough neighborhoods, and so sometimes the journals walk away. Yeah. And you know what? We feel like if that's what happens to that journal, that's what was meant to happen in that journal. But we, the Fire Souls try and keep fairly close tabs, and we're always working on ways to improve that process.
That's a perfect flow through to my next question. For our viewers at home, how do you become a Fire Soul? How can you get involved?
Yeah, well, reach out to us, naturesacred.org. And, if you're interested, there are communities all over the country and the planet, frankly, that need nearby nature. And that's the key, that it's nearby, that it's open, that it's community-led. And the Fire Soul just needs to sort of self-identify and say, this is important to me, and maybe work with a community group if there is one, or start a community group. We've worked with lots of very small local community groups, but the whole idea is that in the design process that they invite a larger community to be a part of it.
Takes a village.
That's right. It takes a village. And it improves the ideas, it improves the outcomes, and it improves the programming, and people end up meeting people that they never otherwise would have collaborated with. The truth is that, we have these cell phones that connect us in some ways, but disconnect us from our very close actual community, because, we're so entrenched in texting back someone who's, 3,000 miles away, which is fine, but you're not saying hello to the person walking by you on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's what that's one of the challenges that we have to figure out as a society, how to overcome, is that how you get your head out of your phone and look around.
Yeah, it's tough, but that's part of why we support and encourage programming in a lot of these places, and to invite people in to take that moment, whether it's yoga in the garden, or watching a step class, or doing storytelling in the garden, storytime in the garden. Those are the kinds of things that hopefully can just help people take a minute, take a breath.
We all need that.
Yeah.
Have a beer.
It's on your mind, Brad.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Someone's had a long day.
Yeah, no, it's all good. This
has been up a long time.
Yeah. It's all good. So with that, I think important for everyone to know and learn about your organization, Nature Sacred. I think as you said, you're very ingrained into the concept of impact. From your perspective, what types of successes are you having? And from an impact perspective, how do you know what you're doing is actually working? It's a loaded question that's very difficult to answer, but I think a lot of not-for-profits, especially in your space and in many spaces, both the environmental world, impact is an important thing. But how do you measure impact? How do you know what you're doing is the right thing you're doing? Right? It's a tough question.
It is a tough question, and I have dealt with this question for a number of years, both when working on film, so when I worked at Participant Media and trying to measure the impact of those films, and things like An Inconvenient Truth and Food Inc. How do you know it's working? How do you know it's actually
You worked on those movies?
Well, I worked at the company that created
okay.
Movies. Yeah, and I led their social impact work for films like that, and creating that movement building takes time.
Takes a lot of time.
I think it did make a big influence, because I can remember being in high school and my economics teacher would always show those movies. So you're right. It does take some time.
Every high school in America showed An Inconvenient Truth. Yeah, I mean that was an impactful movie and an impactful thought.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it changed the conversation, where people are no longer debating if it's real or not, because it is real. And it is a huge threat. It's now a reality, and hopefully we start dealing with that more.
True, all of that is true. And I'll say, in terms of impact, so did a bunch of high schools across America see it? Yes, but that's an output. What's the outcome? So all I'm saying is measuring impact is a really challenging thing to do.
It's a different. Yeah. What scale is it on? Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. So I mean, there's inputs, there's activity, there's outputs, and then there's outcomes. And as much as we can get to outcomes, that's the golden goose, right? Yeah. But it's not always easy to get there, and it's not always easy to measure. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was laughing in my head because I'm a nerd, and there's an accounting standard that talks about when you're buying a business, and if you define a business, there's input, activity, and output. You said that, and I thought of an accounting standard. It's totally awful. Yeah. Anyway, that just derailed things.
Hey,
Yeah, accounting's boring. Yeah.
Not the way you guys do it.
Well, to a degree. So from that perspective, how do you define success, or how do you define impact?
Yeah.
As you said, it's a difficult scale, but what is your definition of it?
Yeah, well, I think a couple of the things that we've shared. I mean, I think the story of Alex Smith is, the embodiment of impact, and that's outcome. That's the golden ticket, right? In terms of, when you know that one small thing that you did over here has a ripple effect. Is that the cause? No. Alex Smith is an amazing individual. Lots of other people affected his life. Like, all these things happened, but we were some small part of that outcome, and then he's paying it forward with all of his ripples.
Yeah.
I mean, whoa. Talk about seismic change. But the journal entries is another. So we know that things are working. We know when people write anything, frankly, but when they say thank you for this place, that it's actually making a difference. And we believe that there are, somewhere between 5 and 10x visitors for those that actually journal.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know the journals are there. They kind of discover them.
Yeah.
Many times people will write and they'll say, I've been to this place 3 times, and this is the first time I noticed there was a journal, because it's underneath the bench, and it's kind of in a little pocket, and you kind of have to discover it, and that's part of the charm, that it's not wildly obvious when you walk up to it. It's not sitting on the bench saying, write in me.
Yeah.
It's not like Alice in Wonderland. So that's part of it, and I think the other piece is, and this is why we did this national program around research, is the research aspects of it, and really drilling down into the scientific benefits of nearby nature. And there are a number of them. There are a number of benefits. And then some of our other spaces have sort of a value stack. So we worked with the Nature Conservancy on a couple of spaces.
Oh, cool.
And so what they are doing is the green infrastructure aspect, and related to tax credits and all kinds of things. And we've partnered with them, and they brought us in to be sort of the community outreach aspect of that, right? So there's a financial and environmental impact for what's happening underneath the ground, and we're kind of what's above ground. We're the programmatic and community aspect to that. So that's a place where you're kind of, in my mind, doubling your impact. And I'd like to see us do more of that type of work.
Definitely. And so as far as sacred spaces, what ballpark, how many sacred spaces exist right now?
There's about 150 sacred spaces, and one of the other reasons that we know it's working, we sent my father's book, Open Spaces, Sacred Places, to a few community foundations, and we got a call from a gentleman named Fred Smith, who is now on our board, we're thrilled to say, from the Community Foundation of Northeast Alabama. And he said, we have some money, meaning we have funding from another source, we have access to land, we'd like to use your model. Can you help us? And we said,
oh,
yeah,
wow,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, out of the clear blue sky.
Yeah.
And
not something you always expect too from a foundation or a community foundation like that.
Right.
You don't expect that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and we said, well, by all means, please. That sounds terrific. We're happy to help, and helped guide him through the process of identifying fire souls and the design elements. And we just a couple of weeks ago sent 18 benches down to Alabama. So with one call, there are 18 benches. There's 2 per the 9 counties in Northeast Alabama.
Wow.
And I think that's when it's working. And the other thing that happened this year is we've had a couple of calls from corporations who have said, you guys are onto something. I think there's a benefit here for both the community and the performance for our employees. Can you help us? And we said, we sure can. Let's talk.
I would rather have that than the Google egg. You hear about like
yeah, it's this,
a pod.
It's kind of like a tomb of relaxation where you kind of go in and
gotta go take a nap in the middle of the day.
I
don't know.
Yeah.
I'm only relaying what I
Nap
see on
pods,
TV.
right?
Yeah.
kind of scares me a little bit. I don't want to go in an egg.
No, I don't have a desire to do that. No, not until the world's ending. Yeah, I like the nature spaces a whole lot better. But
it's fun to see.
yeah, no, that's exciting that you're getting that kind of buzz and people catching on. And I'm sure the more exposure you get or the more publicity you get, the more you're going to find organizations and individuals with that mindset, especially nowadays. I think a lot of us in the world are becoming more in tune with the environment itself, and not just environmental conservation, but that we're really connected to the environment, and we lose sight of that by sitting in traffic every day.
Yeah,
We totally lose sight of that. You imagine the impact you could have if you had you're driving to work and you're having a terrible day. It's 8:00 in the morning. You're in traffic, and you could just veer off the side of the road. And there it was. There's a bench, a nice place, just quiet, serenity, and you could just say, you know what, I'm gonna get to work 15 minutes late today. You probably would have a better day.
Yeah.
Probably would. I guarantee you'd have a
That
better day.
actually happened one time. I was driving to one of our clients, and I was heading a little early ways, so I was gonna get there 20 minutes earlier, and I see this park, and I look over, and it was a huge 9/11 memorial. And it was right on the edge of a cliff, and you could see all these statues, and then you could see the skyline of New York City. And that's probably one of my favorite days just driving, because it took me on a different route. I was a little annoyed that it was taking me up a mountain, and it was just a nice surprise. And I think nature has an ability to connect us to so many great things and reflect, because I felt better that day just being able to experience nature, being able to reflect on just that park, and it was incredible.
Boy, I feel like we really haven't done our job with you guys today and taking you to some of our sacred spaces. I mean, we've had you locked in here all day.
Yeah, I feel like we have to go. You're gonna have to give us a little map.
Yeah. Do a little scavenger hunt.
Yeah, we can do a scavenger hunt.
Yes.
We can see how many in the United. We'll do a challenge.
Oh.
That's what you should do.
Yeah.
You should do a challenge to the world. How many of these can you visit? And
I love that idea.
right?
Yeah.
I love it too. It's kind of like Pokemon World, but
Yeah.
yeah, remember that?
Yeah, well, we definitely can. It's an interesting question, actually. It's something that we've spent a lot of time talking about over the years.
Yeah.
Is to what extent do we involve technology in part of our space?
Only limited. You want to. Yeah, I agree. You probably want to be very limited.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right answer.
Right.
There's just sort of wherever we kind of head, but I do think we're always reticent to jump into that one.
Yeah.
That being said, technology is like anything else. It's agency. So if you can use it for good and use it to try and
100%,
raise awareness around these spaces and engagement, then that's worth it. Because part of what we're about and part of why we're making this shift towards sustainability and towards an operating foundation is to scale, to go 10x, 10x places, 10x engagements, 10x moments of mindfulness. Because think about, each of you have said at one point in this conversation about how you felt different that day when you were in nature, even just for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much. You don't have to go out, and go on a 2-hour hike. And if you multiply that, how did you show up for yourself? How did you show up for your client? How did you show up for your day differently? And if you can multiply that by 100,000 people, 1 million people a day, that's a wow.
Yeah.
The potential ripple on that is, and that's part of the outcome. The ripple is the outcome. Hard to quantify that outcome, but if that person has had that 20 minutes of medicine, that human, I've been calling these human recharge stations. It's a little like the equivalent of the phone recharge stations at the airport.
Yeah.
Only you're recharging your mental, physical, and emotional well-being.
Yeah, it's hard to measure that there are less angry people at work today, but
Yeah.
but I mean the journals tell you that. I mean, very clearly you can tell that. I'm sure people aren't writing, it's not like reading comments on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
You probably don't get too many like angry, negative.
There are some, but you know
do
what?
you?
People often go back and scratch them out or say that's not appropriate, so they self-regulate. I'm serious. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It blows my mind every time I read them. I'm like, oh yeah, because there are angry people and people want to write things down, but 97% of what we
a very
see is all
significant majority.
positive.
Yeah.
And those that are like, don't stay there. People will go back and be like, not appropriate for this space. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So I have a weird question. How many books have you collected?
I think in our possession, we have probably about 500.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of the spaces keep their books and just send us the digital files.
Sure,
because they want them for their site.
Of course,
for
yeah.
some reason.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So the ones we have are those that, there isn't necessarily an organization that wants to hold it. University of Maryland has all theirs, those kinds of things. But yeah, I would say there's a lot more out there than the 500 or so that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could tell us, you could audit us all the way back to the beginning and how much we spent on those little yellow journals over the years. Right in the ring, you could tell us.
I'd rather just visit the space. I don't know that I would accept that job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as you said, you're trying right now. You're in scale mode. You're in future thinking, forward thinking mode. What challenges are you facing in making that transition? What do you find is the biggest challenges to get there, get to where you want to be, whatever that may be?
I think there's a couple of challenges. The first one is as you move from a private grant giving to a private operating foundation, people say, "Why do you need to raise money? You've got some money. You've been giving away some money. Why should I write a check to you?" And the answer in my mind is scale, and scale sounds scale's maybe not even really the right word, but
no.
The answer is that there is so much need that we were able to help prove the model, and that's what originally the TKF Foundation, now Nature Sacred, was able to do. And it's only with a much larger community that we will be able to actually help truly solve the problem and bring this to more and more people. And the truth is that since we started this organization, there has been more and more stressors put on us as a society. We face things like the opioid crisis and other sort of major health issues. And we are living in a more polarized time than perhaps we've ever been in this country. And so to bring people together, to restitch the fabric of our country, one place at a time, that's how it happens. There is no silver bullet for this. And so the answer is, we need a much broader base in order to get this done. And in my mind, success is putting us out of business. I'm not here to be here forever.
Yeah.
But if we can be a part of the movement that gets a green space within a 10 to 15 minute walk of everyone, that's when we can shut the doors and be like, ta-da.
Yeah. That would be wild if that, one day you're like, okay, let's close this book. We're done. This is it. Yeah. We've created a great place for everybody within walking distance.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. There is a perception that nature is an amenity, that it's nice to have, or that it's for wealthy people or people with access. And we believe this is not an amenity. This is an absolute necessity. This is part of our human condition, and it is a human right to have access to green space and to nature and to that which we are, which is nature. And so I think getting a larger constituency on board with this idea that it is a necessity is one of our challenges. It's one of our great opportunities, and I'm excited about getting out there more on the road to help get the word out, and also, you know, have our fire souls be really the big speakers, right? Like these are the people on the ground making this happen day in and day out. And it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. You know, one of our spaces is a labyrinth in part of Baltimore that's pretty rough, and it's right next to what was an open air drug market. And our fire soul in this place went out and did a labyrinth walk with kids every single day until the drug dealers and users went away, found a different place. And
Get out of here. Yeah.
And that's what happened. They were like, okay, this is no longer going to work for us, right? And,
Well, yeah, that or there was a moment of slight compassion out of it, right? Like, we realized, like, let's not be here.
Yeah.
Let's take our activities somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's impact. That's, you know,
That's
it's
impact.
hard to put that on a piece of paper, but you feel it. You know, you see it. You know it.
It's true.
Yeah, it's those are the things that you don't always, in our world, in the financial world, you don't see that.
Yeah.
We think of numbers.
Right.
Think of like, how many meals served, right? That's like the
Right.
But it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with how many meals served, how many children. It has nothing to do with that. It's like the broader picture of touching lives as well as changing an environment. Like it's you can't put a pen to that.
Yeah.
Per se. I mean, you put write it in a notebook, but
And that's the value. And that's the value of the human,
I
right?
talked myself in a corner there.
That's the value of the human. That's the value of the fire soul. These people, and we're all capable of doing it. We don't all do it, but we're all capable of doing it. Of truly just bit by bit making the world better each and every day. And so, anyway, I think those are two of the big challenges for us.
Yeah, definitely. No, and so you know, obviously you said one of the items, and you know, if someone wanted to you know, either donate or participate.
Great question. Lots of different ways, but three things that people can do right now is the first is join the conversation at naturesacred.org and go learn more, join our social, learn about how to become a fire soul. That's number 2. Become a fire soul. You asked this great question, Matt. I mean, how does one do it? And you self-identify. You stand up and say, I believe I am, and therefore you are. And so we can help you in your community and identify a place and try and work through that whole process. And the other is get in your 20 minutes a day. Get in your 20 minutes of nature a day. Encourage your coworkers, encourage your friends, encourage your family, because that will have an exponential positive effect. And even if, you know, we don't yet have an app, though we do have our sacred places on our website, you know, go try and find one of ours, but find any green space that's near you. And really reach out. We're here to help.
Yeah, good stuff. I want to be a fire soul.
Yeah.
We should start that up. We should
a Witham fire soul.
Yeah, right? We got a
Yeah.
Witham fire soul.
I was thinking at the Princeton office that would work well.
Yeah.
Get some
Amanda?
green space, Amanda, yeah.
Come on, get in the conversation. I had to work her in here somehow. Yeah. Right, Tom? Come on, you got to get in on this. Yeah. Awesome. No, it's great to know, and I think, you know, those are 3 things that aren't that big of lifts, right? I mean, being a fire soul probably is a big lift when you get into it, but you know, joining in the conversation or getting involved, being interested in the concept, and just spending 20 minutes a day. I mean, all of us can do that and carve out. Unless you have young kids, but you know, most of us can.
Take the kids.
Take the kids. Yes.
That's perfect.
It's a perfect
Molly and Chase.
Yeah, Molly and Chase can come get the
Bring
nature.
the strollers out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say, I have a 3-year-old, and he has his moments. He's an amazing young human, but he has his moments. But every time he's really having a tantrum or something that, you know, just doesn't, the attitude doesn't seem to be shifting, I just pick him up and we walk outside. And every time, like clockwork, it changes his framework. He stops.
Yep.
And you can start to look at the bird, and you can start to smell the air or feel the breeze, or if you touch the rain or whatever. And it changes.
Yeah.
It's
What's
amazing.
this?
Yeah.
That's what Chase does. You go, what's this? What's this? So any closing thoughts for us? Just some things that, you know, I mean, we talked about a lot today. I think, I love hearing about it, how people measure impact. That's always, I love just hearing about that, because it's interesting. There's so many nonprofits in the world. There's so many great ideas, but I mean, just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you're having an impact or making a difference. And you know, your organization is you have a tangible thing that is making a difference. And it's you know, from our perspective, it's I love hearing about your story and hearing about that. It's
Thank
cool,
you.
good stuff.
Yeah, it's meaningful work. It's beautiful work. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of it. And that's really all we are, is some small part of it. But trying to spark and support and ignite that in others. And ultimately, for me and for the organization, like, this is about changing the course of human events. Really, it's about soul work, and that's deep stuff. And that's not prescriptive from our perspective, but it is about creating that opportunity to bring the human closer to nature, or really, as we do, bring nature closer to the humans, because we're living more and more in cities, and so these spaces have to come to where people are, and really at this point, on some level, we are the endangered species, and so if we can connect more with nature, the healthier both we and nature can become.
Amen. Yeah. So I want to close, because I think and we'll put a picture up on this, but you have to conceptualize some of the writing by reading the writing on the wall, and I believe you told me that the writing on the wall are from journals and from actual things.
Yes.
So I think I want to read a couple of these, because I think it puts some real, and I can't read Mandarin, so I don't think I'm going to read that.
That one's a little difficult.
But yeah, there's a couple, like that one down there is a grasshopper saying "Hi, lady."
To a ladybug.
To a little ladybug. Yeah.
I really like that one, the light blue. What a surprise to find this book, this bench, this place. What mystery and history took place here.
Yeah, what a great metaphor for life. Our wandering in circles is not meaningless. It takes us to our center if we walk with intent.
Señor, estoy aquí una vez más, buscando tu amor, compasión y comprensión. Escúchame, mi Dios, y ayúdame a escucharte. Dame un corazón abierto y lleno de amor.
One of my favorites actually is, funny enough, recreated in our bathroom. I don't know if you guys saw it today, but it's a beautiful sketch by what I think is a young person, but we don't know. And it is a sketch of a young girl next to a balloon that actually is connected to the earth and has deep roots, like a tree. And it says, "In this fractured world, I find peace." And I love the fact that, we can have lofty, fun, joyful ideas like balloons, but to be deeply rooted. And that it's tough. Life is hard. Yeah. And we're living in challenging times. So we need places to get rooted within ourselves and within our communities at large.
Agreed. And this one for all you New Yorkers out there. Thank you for a moment of peace on a beautiful day, parentheses, even despite of the BQE traffic. Awesome. Yeah, these were cool. And I'm sure there's a million more great phrases, and who doesn't like a good phrase on a Friday? Yeah. So this is...
Phrase
cool.
Friday.
Phrase Friday. Yeah, there you go. It used to be Flex Friday, but...
Now Phrase Friday.
Now we grew up. So, yeah, good stuff. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This was awesome.
Thank you both. It was a real
It's been a fun
pleasure.
day.
It's been a fun day. Yeah, we had a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Warriors.
Hey, Warriors. Thanks for tuning in. On the next episode of Civic Warriors, we'll talk with Jeff Mullins from Rebuilding Warriors about their incredible mission to provide our veterans with service dogs and the amazing impact their services have realized. Make sure to subscribe to Civic Warriors, and thanks for all your support. Have a great day.